The Ukrainians are making a terrible mistake. They carried on counteroffensive around Vovchansk with little progress. Meanwhile, Russians' reinforcement has arrived. The Russia 810th Guards Naval Infantry Division has arrived in Vovchansk. They used to fight in Mariupol and Kherson. According to Western media, this brigade was defeated twice. But still, in 2024, they were expanded to 810th Division. According to Ukrainian COD report, this division was found near Vovchansk. This is not good news for the Ukrainians. Near Lipsy, Russia 155 Guards Naval Infantry Brigade has arrived. They used to attack Volodar and suffered heavy losses. But in April 2024, they captured Novomihalivka. Now they are fighting near Lipsy. So Russians' reinforcement has arrived, but for the past week, Ukrainians has little progress. Ukrainians are making a terrible mistake, putting their resources in Vovchansk. But there is a logic behind it. Maybe we cannot blame the Ukrainian soldiers. We will talk about that in detail in this video. Welcome to Jason Zhang's channel. This is the weekly report from June the 16th to June the 23rd. For the past week, the Ukrainians carried on counteroffensive near Hilboki. On June the 18th, they successfully get into the village and capture the first line of the houses. The Russians made counteroffensive and there were heavy fighting in the village. Now the 11th Tank Regiment of the 18th Motor Rifle Division is operating here. The Russia 155 Guards Naval Infantry Brigade has also arrived for reinforcement. From the Ukrainian side, the 71st Jaeger Brigade has battle report here. Near Vovchansk, for the past week, Ukrainian continue counteroffensive in Vovchansk. This T2108 road is from the north to the south. Both sides are fighting along this road. The Ukrainians are trying to cut the Russian supply line and encircle this part of the Russians. And the Russians are also attacking from the east. So when was the first time the Ukrainians crossed the river? It's on May the 23rd. Now a whole month passed. They still haven't captured this town. They suffered heavy casualties in this city. So this week, the Ukrainians changed their strategy. They try to attack from east and from the west. From the east, the Ukrainians cross the river and retake the village of Tikhe. From here, they may try to flank the Russians from the east. From the west, the Ukrainians start counteroffensive near Syrskyi. On June the 20th, the Ukrainians successfully get into this village. Now there are heavy fighting here. So we can see Ukrainians are stuck in the Vovchansk city, so they try to flank from the east and from the west. This counteroffensive has started for over a month. If the Ukrainians cannot make significant progress in the coming week, their counteroffensive will fail. In Luhansk front, the Russians continue their offensive. For the past week, the Russians tried to attack Stelmahivka from the south. The Russians captured this small village and try to expand this area. Now we can see Stelmahivka is in a bad position. The Russians can attack from the east, from the north, and from the south. Here the 27th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade is operating. They belong to the 1st Guards Tank Army. On Oskil River, there is an important bridge near Borova. On June the 19th, Russians blow up this bridge. This is a very important bridge. Many Ukrainian supplies are going across the bridge. It's an important signal. The Russians could have attacked this bridge a month ago. Why do they attack now? It's very likely the Russians have a big offensive coming, so they try to cut the line first. In Syrskyi direction, the Russians continue attack. On June the 4th, the Russians capture this high ground and try to flank from the east. On June the 16th, they capture this area and successfully get into Rostorivka and capture the first line of the buildings. On June the 18th, Russians attack from the south along the railroad and successfully get into the village. If the Ukrainians do not have successful counteroffensive, this town will likely to fall. Here is still Russia 106 Airborne Division, along with some former LPR brigades. Here the main defense force is Ukrainian the 10th Assault Brigade. In Chasiv direction, heavy fighting continues. On June the 8th, the Ukrainians made counteroffensive and recaptured Kalinina. A week later, around June the 18th, the Russians attack and successfully get into the village again. In this micro-district, for the past week, heavy fighting continues. Here is a picture of Chasiv micro-district. This week, we can see more and more buildings are destroyed in this town. The Russians report said there are around 150 Ukrainian soldiers still defending this area. Here the main attacking force is Russian 19th Guards Airborne Division. From the Ukrainian side, there is an interesting report saying the 5th Separate Assault Brigade was transferred to Kharkiv for counteroffensive. If that's true, the defense force here are weakened again. In Toretsk direction, the Russians carried out successful offensive. Here the yellow line is the 2022 line of contact. On June the 19th, the Russians pushed west for 2 kilometers. On June the 22nd, the Russians successfully attacked from the north and captured this village, Shumy. This is very surprising. The Ukrainian has a lot of trenches here since 2014. This line haven't changed for the past 2 years. How is that possible? The defense line crashed in 2 to 3 days. It's very likely the Ukrainians put out too much forces to reinforce Kharkiv offensive. So here the defense is weakened. Are the Russians trying to attack Toretsk? We don't know. If that's true, the Russians will have to dedicate a lot of forces. I think Toretsk is not Russia's main target. They are only here to test the Ukrainian defense, and the defense crashed. So this is very surprising for everyone. In Pokrovsk direction, for the past week, Russians continue to make progress. Near Kalinovi, the Russians improved their tactical position. The Russians attacked from the west and captured this area. On June the 19th, the Russians captured these trenches. Now the Russians are getting close to Kalinovi, but it's very likely the Russians are not attacking Kalinovi yet. They are pushing west. Here Russian 27th Division and 132 Brigade are operating. In Novo-Alexandrivka, after Russians capture this town, they expand the territory. We can see there are Ukrainian trenches along this line. This is a good position to push towards the T50 road here. There's only one village left, Vostivzinka. It's very likely to be the Russians' next target. Here the Russia's 30th Brigade and 35th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade are operating. Near Syrskyi, Russians continue the offensive. On June the 16th, they captured this area. Here is a trench line north of Syrskyi, so the Russians can attack Syrskyi from the north and from the east. Here Russians' 15th Brigade and 90th Tank Division are operating. This is the main force of the 41st Combined Army of Central Military District. Near Umansk, for the past week, the Russians continue offensive and expand the territory. Now we can see, east of the river line, the Ukrainians have only one town left, Novoselivka Persia. This will be the next target for the Russians. It's likely the Russians will capture this whole area soon. After that, they will push west and push north towards the T504 road. In Krasnohorivka direction, the Russians continue offensive with very little progress. Near Kurahovi, the Russians continue to push west and into the next town. So we can see in Donetsk front, the Russians are pushing west every day and they are making progress every day. Thanks to the Kharkiv offensive, the Ukrainian defense here are weakened. That's why the Russians can make progress. That's what I said in the very beginning. Ukrainians' Kharkiv counteroffensive is a big mistake. But there's a logic behind it. The president of Ukraine demanded General Syrskyi that there must be a Ukrainian offensive in 2024. And General Syrskyi said yes, and he made a promise. But the Ukrainian army doesn't have enough strength to attack and defend at the same time. If they attack south in Zaparozhia front, the Ukrainian will run into a war just like last year. So from General Syrskyi's perspective, if the Ukrainian army have to attack, where is the best place? Northern Kharkiv, of course. It's Russia's newly captured lands with little trenches. Actually, thanks to Ukrainians' lack of preparation, there are almost no trenches here. So if Ukrainian attacks, it's gonna be attrition war for both sides. But from Russians' perspective, they would like the Ukrainians to attack northern Kharkiv front as well, because Russians have the artillery advantage 5-1 in northern Kharkiv, and they use FAB bombs every day to wipe out Ukrainian soldiers. It's a Russian trap. The Ukrainians are stuck in the north and the Russians are pushing towards Pokrovsk every day. So I think this is a shit show from the Ukrainian side. But you cannot blame the Ukrainian generals and Ukrainian soldiers. Your boss set the wrong KPI. You have to choose the short-term benefit, even if it's a long-term disaster. That's what's happening now. That's all for today. This is Jason Zhang from Shenzhen, China. Thank you for watching and see you next time.